All right, I am back. I I have exciting news. I opened a bunch of stuff and now I have From the Grave and the Skeleton Brick. Boy, From the Grave and the Skeleton Brick are so annoying to play against, especially at lower levels. You don't have all the tools available to you. For instance, Spiked Roller and Cold Snap. I don't have those, and so if someone were to play From the Grave against me, then I could be in trouble if I don't have my Poison Brick up. So From the Grave is such a chancy card to play because it can be stopped for free by a poison brick. One poison brick can stop all of the skeletons of From the Graves. From the Grave produces six skeletons. They're rather wimpy skeletons, but they do move at a speed of three. And each one can take a half a heart. So it can take, what is that? 3 hearts total if every skeleton hits the wall. So it can be a very dangerous tool, and it can be very useful against bots. The downside is people can get behind in mana when playing with From the Grave, and because it's random where the skeletons are produced, um, it can be hard to place it properly, so you get the most benefit out of it. So here's my old deck, and I am switching to this deck. Now, if you notice, my average cost is 2.8, and that's because I don't have all the units that I would normally use in order to bring down the cost of this deck, unfortunately. So I'm stuck with it using a higher average cost deck. This could get me into trouble. I could run out of mana, and I could lose games because of that. So I have to play carefully. And part of the way that you play carefully is, well, I'll get to it in a second. I switched also to the dragon, and this is because now I am scared that someone might play From the Grave on me. Since I am up to the level where I have From the Grave, that means other people might be playing it against me. And the dragon at this level, the dragon's about the only tool I have in order to stop it besides the poison brick. Also, if I am using From the Grave, the skeletons move at 3, the dragon moves at 4. It can be very hard for players to respond to a bunch of units moving really quickly. So by switching from the Viking to the dragon, I've really increased the speed of my deck. The dragon moves at 4, these skeletons move at 3, the devil moves at 5, the skellywag moves at 3. Even the koala moves at 2. It's pretty slow, but it moves at 2. And so by increasing the speed, and then the koala has all the mobility of being able to jump over bricks, this makes it so that hopefully, and the skeletons from the skeleton brick, I'm hoping that my opponents are constantly feeling behind, and they'll have to make all these rush decisions. Maybe they will respond incorrectly. They'll waste mana. So this is where you are creating a deck that causes you to control the tempo of the game. There are some players that are really good at this. They control the tempo, and that's how they win. Some players like me, I win by making smart mana trades, where I'm always coming out at least 1 or 2 mana ahead in every time I counter somebody, and I gradually will suffocate you with mana. That's my normal play style. But other players, their normal play style is they keep the tempo of the game going so fast that you cannot keep up, and you make poor decisions, you make mistakes, and they end up winning that way. It's a much more dangerous way to play. It's a much more exciting way to play. It works better at low level. If you can manage to not make mistakes by playing this type of play style, then at low levels you will really come out ahead. And then at high levels, when you get really high and you're really skilled at it, then you can take somebody who's defensive like me, and you can get me on the back foot, and you can. It can be very difficult for me to play against a tempo style play. Also, what's really good about this deck, if you notice, I have all four main ways of taking hearts. I consider there to be four ways of taking hearts in this game. One is the Juggernaut strategy, which is you use a tank unit like the Dragon, the Viking, the Mummy, and you just plop them down, and they have so much health that they do not die before they hit the wall. So I've got the Dragon as my tank unit. It's not as good as the Viking or the Mummy. The Mummy is the best right now, in my opinion, but I can put a Witch Doctor behind the Dragon, and the chances are my Dragon will survive to the end. That's the hope. There is the strike, or the rush, or something like that, you would say. A striker unit is like a devil or a koala, and these, the devil operates on moving really fast. The koala operates on jumping and over bricks. These are units that you can use to make a kind of a quick strike to try and steal half a heart or a whole heart here or there. And even if the devil or the koala is not successful, it distracts the opponent. It causes them to shift their attention over to trying to stop the devil or the koala, which then allows your Dragon or your Viking or your Mummy to take one more plodding step down the field towards their wall. A third strategy is what you call Swarm, and this is where you use a lot of low-cost units, like, say, From the Grave or the Skeleton Brick, and you just pump so many units at your opponent that they cannot possibly stop them all. And you try and fill up as many lanes as you can. There's 10 lanes in the game, so you try and fill up all 10 lanes with units, and then your opponent is like, how do I handle it? And they can't handle it, and you just overwhelm them, and eventually somebody hits the wall. Then the fourth way of taking hearts, this is my default mode in playing this game. In fact, I think for a lot of high elo players, this is the default mode, and that is what I call mana constriction. And this is over the long haul, you make all these smart mana trades, and you eventually have so much mana that you can play more units than your opponent can, and they cannot stop everything. You might call it a delayed swarm, but it's really based around the concept of just controlling your mana better. And so mana constriction is in my deck because I use the boulder, which is useful to destroy 3 mana units, 4 mana units. The Witch Doctor can also be used to great effect to stop units that cost more. The Koala has a surprising amount of hit points, which again can cause it to be successful in mana trades. Then I get free units from my Skeleton Brick, so this is like free mana basically. And then the Poison Brick can wipe out quite a lot, multiple units for free, and the Fire Brick can wipe out tanks pretty well. So I could stick a Witch Doctor for 2 mana behind a Fire Brick, and I could stop a Viking. So I have built into my deck all 4 methods of taking hearts. So it's really nice when you can have a deck like this. Not all decks work this way, but this can be really an effective way to build a deck where you think through several different ways of taking hearts. You put them all in a single deck, and then you can switch up how you play your deck depending on what your opponent is doing. And if your devil is not working, you use your dragon. If your dragon's not working, you use From the Grave. And you keep changing what cards you prioritize in your play. Speaking of what cards you prioritize, how I play a 2.8 deck as opposed to a 2.5 deck or a 2.6 deck or a 2.4 deck it all depends on what I hold in reserve. So in the game, there are 4 cards in your hand, 1 card on deck, and then there's 3 cards you don't see. There's 8 total cards in your in your deck, and you can actually reduce the number of cards that are in your deck down to 6 by holding 2 cards in reserve. You can also reduce it down to 5 by holding 3 cards in reserve, but that's much harder to play. So I can hold 2 cards in reserve, and it kind of effectively makes my deck a 6-card deck. So what I would do in playing deck like this is I would probably pick either the From the Grave or the Dragon to hold in reserve. Probably From the Grave, because it's much more risky to play From the Grave. So I hold From the Grave in reserve, and then I hold my Roll Laser in reserve. And the Roll Laser I hold in reserve just to destroy mana bricks if I don't have my Boulder handy. So then it's like you can take these two cards out of my deck, and I basically have the Dragon, the Devil, Koala, Witch Doctor, Scallywag, and Boulder. So then if you take these together and you average their mana cost, the average mana cost actually comes to 2.5. So by holding these two cards in reserve, I reduce my average mana cost down to 2.5. And if I really focus on playing only the 6 cards that are not in reserve, then I can keep up with the mana costs of my opponent. And then what I do, at some point, when I start to get ahead of my opponent in mana, that's when I drop From the Grave. And if my opponent's having a hard time responding to From the Grave, then I switch from the Dragon to the From the Grave in what I'm holding in reserve. So I start out by playing the Dragon, but then at some point I switch over to From the Grave. And this is especially effective come the 30-second mark, where there's 30 seconds remaining in the match. Hopefully by that point I've already switched over to using From the Grave. And then when in the last 30 seconds of the match, I can you get double mana. At that point, you start rotating quickly through all of your low cost cards to keep From the Grave coming up as much as possible. And you try to play as many From the Graves as you can. And then you overwhelm your opponent with skeletons. So that is kind of how you play a deck like this. I'm going to stop this video, and in my next video, I will play some games with this deck, and we'll see if I have any success or if I fall flat in my face and look like an idiot.